Coming up at our number 10 spot, we have the couldn't shower woman. This person on Reddit mentioned that throughout her whole life, she has been obsessed with the Titanic, but in a way where she has always feared it. Her biggest fear was the Titanic for so long, not bugs or monsters under the bed. It was always the Titanic. She subsequently feared water because she would constantly have flashes of being on the Titanic when in water, and especially if it was cold. Her memories and thoughts were so vivid that she actually had a hard time showering and would have her sister sit in the bathroom with her until she was 17 years old. Whenever she would see pictures of sunken ships, and specifically when she saw pics of the Titanic, she would get anxious, even though sometimes she would seek them out. She doesn't have any specific memories, just flashes of staring up at the boat as it was sinking, and it has completely altered her life. That's wild. Imagine being so scared that you would literally need someone to be in the bathroom with you while you shower. She either was actually on the Titanic or she really needs to speak to someone about her active imagination. That would be so terrifying to experience. In our number 9 spot, we have The Water is Coming. A woman's son that chose to remain nameless had an obsession with the Titanic. He was constantly talking about the Titanic and wanting to watch the movie, and so one day she decided to take him to the Titanic exhibit. After going there, he began to have night terrors, and one night in particular she would never forget. She was watching TV when she heard loud banging in her son's room. She went inside to see him on all fours and heard him yell, "Go, go, go, the water is coming." And then he let out a scream. But it wasn't his voice. It was the voice of an older man coming out of him. Apparently after that incident, her son started to talk about it less, and she chalked it up to that maybe his soul had come to terms with the catastrophe and was more at peace. Wow. I definitely would have been extremely terrified if I had witnessed this. I wouldn't have been able to go back to sleep, at least, that's for sure. In our number 8 spot, we have Michael Kushner. A TikToker and photographer by the name of Michael Kushner explained his Titanic story and how he has memories from the incident. In his explanation, he spoke about how around 7 years old is when you start to lose your memories from a past life, and when he was 7, he saw the Titanic movie 4 times, and every time he saw the sinking scene, he felt that something wasn't right. Throughout his life, the Titanic followed him everywhere. When he moved to London, it was the 100-year anniversary, and on the day he landed, a ship sunk, and everyone was saying that it was just like the Titanic. The first playbill he ever photographed was called The Unsinkable Molly Brown. And even James Cameron, the director of the Titanic, said he didn't feel the sinking scene was depicted accurately and explained why, and Michael said that his explanation aligned with what he felt. Out of all of the stories that I'm going to tell you about today, this guy definitely feels like he could have been on the Titanic in another life. Would love to know your thoughts in the comment section below. In our number 7 spot, we have Paul Emerald. Paul Emerald is a Los Angeles producer that took part in a series of past life regressions for a television show he was working on. What he found, though, led to a journey that he did not expect, and he even wrote a book on it. He was convinced for so long that he wasn't going to live past the age of 25, and when he started doing these regressions, he realized that he had a lot of weird similarities with a passenger that died on the ship named John Jack Phillips, who was 25 when the boat sank. He decided to visit John's hometown, and it was there that he experienced major deja vu, like he knew where everything was. So he did some more regressions and saw John's whole life. He is convinced that John was him in another life. Wow, that's an incredible story. Imagine just going to a random town and knowing where everything is because you were there in another life. In our number 6 spot, we have the mysterious Reddit user. This is told by a Reddit user who explained that he always had a fascination with the Titanic and an overwhelming amount of sadness and empathy around the situation. He explains that he's not a very empathetic person, but for some reason he feels an increased amount of empathy for those that died on the ship. This user always freaks out when it comes to water, and drowning is one of their biggest fears. They did a past life meditation to see if they could get a name, but only got a picture of being somewhere cold and icy. So interesting. I think it's possible that maybe there's a lot of people out there that didn't actually die on the Titanic, but they did die on like a shipwreck in a past life, and then maybe it would make sense why they would resonate with the Titanic, but Who knows? In our number 5 spot, we have A Love to Remember. A 19-year-old woman by the name of Amanda remembered being on the Titanic with her past love. She remembered being a first-class passenger by the name of Julia who met her man named Mark on board the ship. They both ended up taking a lifeboat together and surviving the disaster, and later on ended up getting married. Amanda said that she has a hard time finding love in her life nowadays because no one quite meets the standards of her previous love. Aw, that's sweet and terribly sad. Hopefully she ends up finding him again in this life. In our number 4 spot, we have the claustrophobic man. This person is another Reddit user that very much considers themselves to have died on the Titanic in a past life, and their justification? They hate being cold and can't swim well. Interesting. He said, "I'm deeply claustrophobic, and so maybe I got trapped somehow, but all I know is that I've been deeply fascinated by the Titanic and the movie." Do you think it's possible that the movie casted some kind of spell on people around the world, and because it felt so lifelike, people just felt as if they were there? Another user commented that they did lock passengers in the steerage, so it's possible this person was one of those passengers. Coming up in our number 3 spot, we have the girl with the green eyes. This person believed they were on the Titanic because of a past life regression circle that they took part in. This person is a part of a pagan group, and one day they were doing a past life regression exercise, and she saw herself go down a long hallway with white walls and wood paneling and a plush red carpet and a fancy wooden door at the end of the hallway. Honestly, this sounds like the final scene from the movie, but I'm gonna go on. Anyway, she goes into a room filled with water, and a girl comes up to her with piercing green eyes and a blue lily crystal hairpin in her hair. Her eyes were filled with tears. They got into a lifeboat together, but then the girl got out and continued to hold her hand. Once they lowered the boat, her hand slipped from the girl's hand as they were separated. Interesting. I swear something like that happens in the movie as well. I really wonder what people were saying before the movie came out and if their experiences were described similarly then. In our number 2 spot, we have Alfred Peacock. A young boy that was born 2 years after the sinking of the Titanic would have tons of visions of being on the Titanic growing up. He felt that he was on the Titanic and couldn't imagine any other explanations for his visions. He remembered being a young boy on the Titanic and that he lived in the 3rd class cabin with his family. He remembered that his name started with an A and ended with an E and a D, and that led him to think that his name was Alfred. After doing some research of the passengers that died on the ship, he came across an Alfred Peacock that was young on the ship, and he believed that his memories were then confirmed. In our number 1 spot, we have Charles Latoller. A man remembers being a passenger on the Titanic that went by the name of Charles Latoller. Charles was a British sailor who was a 2nd officer on board the Titanic. He did not die on the Titanic, he was one of the survivors, and went on to live till the 50s. So this person must not be too old if he feels that he really was him in another life. He has flashes of walking down the staircase on the ship and seeing beautiful gowns. He always felt connected to the Titanic, and after discovering a picture of Charles, he knew he felt a connection with it, and he felt that it was himself. In June of 2001, when he was writing a book about the Titanic, a woman randomly came up to him in a coffee shop and told him that he was on the Titanic, and opened up one of his research books of the Titanic and pointed to an officer, and sure enough, she pointed to Charles Latoller.
Starting off this list in our number 10 spot, we have this haunting call. Whales truly are some of the coolest animals on Earth, and humpback whales are no exception. The males of the species are known for their songs, which last from 10 to 20 minutes and are actually pretty complex. They will repeat these songs for hours at a time, and it honestly isn't exactly known why they sing these songs at all. All the males in the group will produce the same song, and it will change seasonally. The females are also able to produce noise, but for some reason it is only the males who seem to produce these long songs. It is unclear how the whales even produce these sounds, however, because they don't actually have vocal cords. This is all super cool and interesting, but the whole reason you're here is for the sound, so let's take a listen to a more haunting track released by the humpback whale. Okay, so please tell me I'm not alone in thinking that that was the most beautifully haunting sound I've ever heard come from the sea. But also imagine being alone in the ocean, not knowing what that was, and then hearing it. Probably pretty terrifying, right? At least we're all safe here in YouTube land. In our number 9 spot today, we have this marine chorus. Okay, so out of context, if I played you this sound, what would you think it is? Definitely not something underwater, right? Well, as it turns out, this sound was indeed captured under the water, and these are the sounds of fish calls. While I always expected the chorus of marine animals to sound a little more similar to the stylings of Sebastian the crab, apparently that isn't even close. Okay, I'm not gonna lie, I didn't even know that most fish had calls, but it turns out that our human ears just can't perceive all of the hoots, moans, barks, and chirps that take place in the vast seas. This recording actually helped scientists realize that there are fish who sing together in a chorus every day at dusk and dawn. There have now been around 800 species of fish that have been identified and confirmed to make some form of noise, and apparently some fish even engage in shouting matches in noisier parts of the ocean, which is kind of hilarious to imagine. I guess on the list of creepy noises, this one is less creepy and more just informative. In our number 8 spot today, we have the whistle. This is a sound that was first recorded in 1997 by the NOAA and was the source of many mysteries for years while people speculated about what may have caused the sound. While it still isn't exactly clear, it is now believed that the sound may have come from an underwater volcano eruption. If you didn't know, underwater or submarine volcanoes are located in all oceans on our Earth, and they're extremely interesting. There are certain kinds of marine animals that only exist near these extreme environments. Many submarine volcanoes are located near the areas of tectonic plate formations, which are also known as mid-ocean ridges. There's a YouTube user called Some Canadian, and they left a comment on a video of this whistle sound that pretty much sums it up exactly. First, we'll listen to the sound played at 10 times the original speed. The comment read, quote, "It could be the sound of something moving through tunnels. 1. Volcanic eruptions and gases. 2. Something big and hungry. You choose." I think they might really be onto something there. In our number 7 spot today, we have bloop. Why are all of the weirdest ocean sounds first recorded in 1997? Bloop is another one that came from that year, and it was a loud and unusual sound that was placed as occurring several times off the southern coast of South America, and it was so loud that it could be heard over 5,000 kilometers away. At first, researchers were confused because, while the sound was actually similar to known sounds of living creatures, it was just way too loud that not even the blue whale, the largest living creature, could have produced it. So what is it then? Well, as it turns out, it is in fact not the Kraken, and instead it is actually consistent with ice quakes that are generated by large icebergs as they crack and fracture. It seems like this sound going with that explanation doesn't really make sense, but hey, I'm no scientist. But here's the sound for you to judge for yourself. In our number 6 spot today, we have the Western Pacific biotwang. In 2014, researchers and scientists heard weird sounds coming from the Mariana Trench, which, for the record, seems like the worst place for there to be strange noises coming from. For years, experts couldn't pin down this sound, and it was dubbed the Western Pacific biotwang, and while there is now a theory that was proposed by researchers from Oregon State University, they have also said that they might be entirely wrong. First, for reference, here's a little clip of the sound I'm talking about. Okay, so if you're like me, my mind immediately went to something alien related or some sort of creature that perhaps we haven't yet discovered. I mean, this is the Mariana Trench we're talking about. The theory put forward by the Oregon State researchers was that perhaps this may be a new type of baleen whale call. Okay, that's probably the best of all of the options, but I really don't like when someone tells me the answer to a scientific mystery only to tell me that that might not actually be the answer at all. While the low part of the sound would make sense to attribute to the baleen whale, it's the end high-pitched twangy part that would be incredibly unique. The wide range of frequencies in the sound are what continues to baffle those who are trying to find the source of this mysterious sound. In our number 5 spot today, we have Julia. Julia is a sound that was recorded in 1999 by the US National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration, or NOAA, which I've already talked about today. It sounds like it could be straight out of a horror movie, so considering it was a sound that came from our ocean and at first no one could tell where it had come from, it It really was quite frightening. This sound has now likely been demystified, as researchers are pretty positive they know the origin of it. It is now believed that this sound was caused by an iceberg running aground off Antarctica. The sound, however, was insanely loud. It was so loud that it could be heard over the entire equatorial Pacific Ocean Autonomous Hydrophone Array. Researchers were later able to narrow down what they believe may have been the point where the sound originated, although they've never actually been able to pinpoint it exactly. Most of the time when people hear the Julia sound, they hear it sped up at 16 times the original speed, but today we are going to listen to a clip of the sound at regular speed because I think it is much more eerie this way. In our number 4 spot today we have knock. Okay, this is one that I'll admit was not captured by a submarine, but it was still underwater and it truly is terrifying. A few years ago, a beluga whale named Knock, who was unfortunately in captivity, was recorded as he swam below the water. Beluga whales have been called the canaries of the sea, and for good reason, but Knock really wanted to up the ante and instead blessed us all with this sound. Knock had this uncanny ability to mimic the rhythm and tone of human voices, and it truly is kind of frightening. It of course is also a little sad, as part of this was probably because he spent most of his life being forced to listen to humans speak because he was being held in captivity. Before this recording of Knock, the voices of belugas and their sometimes human-like sounds have been talked about, but Knock was the first time it was recorded, and honestly, I kind of wish it hadn't been. In our number 3 spot today we have the bioduct. Since the 1960s, this sound has absolutely stumped researchers who heard it. This sound was basically what the name attributed to it would suggest. It sounded like some sort of mechanical duck. For decades, researchers would hear this sound and it would often be heard and recorded again in the spring and winters. After all of these years though, it seems as though the answers to this mysterious sound are finally coming to light. In 2013, researchers attached sensors that collect acoustic data to 2 whales. One of those tags recorded for 18 hours and the other for 8, and the whales they were attached to were traveling with other whales in groups of 5 to 40, and they were all eating basically the entire time. Throughout this time, with the tags on the whales, there were a total of 32 calls heard, and this data is what led researchers to finally understand where the bioduct sound was coming from. As it turns out, this mysterious sound was actually the call of the minke whale. Researchers still aren't exactly clear as to what the call means to the whales, but it was a fantastic discovery that finally closed an almost 50-year-old scientific mystery. In our number 2 spot today we have upsweep. We all know how little we know about the ocean, and that also includes what kind of creatures lie in it. So while this mysterious sound out of context probably wouldn't be that freaky, when put into this situation it becomes quite a bit more eerie. This sound is referred to as upsweep, and it was caught when the Pacific Marine Environmental Laboratory started its sound surveillance system in August of 1991. The sound is apparently more seasonal, with its peaks in spring and fall, but it is unclear if the changing of seasons is responsible for this sound, or if it's coming from something that lurks in the ocean and remains undiscovered. Just for reference, here's a clip of that sound played at 20 times the original speed. It is possible that this sound could be coming from underwater volcanic activity, but it is also possible that it's not, so who really knows? In our number 1 spot today we have an earthquake. Okay, so to add another creepy Mariana Trench sound to this list, we have one that was taken from the bottom of the Challenger Deep. In fact, it was the first ever sound recording to be taken from the bottom of the Challenger Deep, so it's a pretty cool scientific advancement as well as a terrifying sound. Despite the crushing pressures and the fact that there's no sunlight, the Challenger Deep is actually pretty noisy, and that is because of the fact that sound travels a really long way underwater, which ends up kind of turning the Challenger Deep into a sort of echo chamber of oceanic sounds. So while the recording was able to pick up things like the sound of a boat almost 11 kilometers overhead and the sounds of whale calls, they were also able to pick up the sound of a magnitude 5 earthquake rumbling near Guam on July 16th, 2015. I'm not gonna lie, while being one of the scariest things I've ever heard, this is also one of the coolest things I've ever heard in my life too. Science really is just so cool sometimes. Starting off this list, in our number 10 spot we have the train. The train is a sound that was first recorded on March 5th, 1997. It is often referred to as the train because, well, it kind of sounds like a train's whistle, or maybe like the sound of the wheels grinding against the tracks, but in my opinion, it just sounds like a ghost meetup. Despite the years it's been since this sound was captured, no one is entirely sure where it came from. The current belief is that it may have been from an extremely large iceberg in the Ross Sea near Cape Adare, but that is still only a guess. The steady hum might be the sound of the keel of an iceberg dragging across the sea floor. But what if it's not? In our number 9 spot today we have this underwater knocking. This knocking sound was picked up by an underwater hydrophone, and for a while it had people stumped until they were able to find the culprit. Before we talk about what this sound is coming from, imagine being in the deep, dark, icy waters and hearing that sound. It is straight up out of a horror movie, but as it turns out, the real source isn't quite as scary. This is actually the sound of a species of haddock fish. These types of haddock are a ray-finned fish that can be found in the North Atlantic Ocean. The males of the species will produce this drumming or pulsating sound in order to attract mates during the mating season. Outside of the mating season, a similar sound is also produced, and that is known to be used during aggressive encounters with other male fish. In our number 8 spot today we have the 52 Hertz whale. This whale has been nicknamed the loneliest whale in the world, but the truth is, we don't even really know if that's true because we've never actually seen it. This whale, which we don't know if it's male or female or what whale species it belongs to, sings its song like no other whale does. This whale was first heard in 1989 on a hydrophone, and while the calls were most similar to that of a blue whale, there was one striking difference, and that was the frequency of the calls. This whale calls at 52 Hz with regular blue whales calling between 10 and 40 Hz. Even fin whales are usually heard at 20 Hz, so it left everyone stumped as to what could be going on here. A researcher named Bill Watkins dedicated his life to trying to reveal what exactly was going on here, and while he passed away in 2004, he found that this whale was not only unusual, but totally unique. The biggest challenge is the fact that we cannot locate this whale. Their calls can be heard for hundreds of miles, and trying to find one single whale in the vastness of the ocean is next to impossible. Many people have suggested that perhaps the whale is deaf, and this is what has led to its unique song, but of course without the whale, how would we possibly know for sure? In our number 7 spot today we have Slow Down. Slow Down is another sound that was captured in 1997, but this one was captured on May 19th of that year. The 90s was apparently the height of the capturing weird, unexplained ocean sounds wave because wow, there are so many. This sound got its name because of the fact that the sound descends in frequency over about 7 minutes. Again, this is another sound I would have just assumed was ghosts, but luckily there are people out there who know more than me who continue to research these things and try to get to the bottom of these mysteries. This sound was so loud it was detected by different sensors nearly 5,000 kilometers apart from each other. Scientists were able to locate the sound as coming from somewhere off the Antarctic Peninsula. While they couldn't directly find the source of the sound, they used their deductive reasoning, and it is currently believed that the sound might have been the result of a drifting iceberg as it scratched the seafloor until it slowly came to a stop. I guess the icebergs were just moving around a lot in the mid to late 90s. In our number 6 spot today we have the Sigh whale. Here we are again with another whale sound that just truly doesn't seem like it should be the sound coming out of any living creature, but hey, in the sea the rules are just different and everything's a little weirder. These whales can be found in subtropical, temperate, and subpolar waters around the world. They're sadly a species that has seen their numbers decrease rapidly, especially due to the historical commercial whaling that took place in the 19th and 20th centuries. The exact number of these whales that currently exist is unknown, but they are a species that is currently listed as being threatened. Like many other whales, these guys use their voice to communicate with one another, and that is where this sound comes from. Other than the sound that they're making, the increase in noise under the water, especially man-made noise, is actually a threat to their existence. The sound can interrupt their normal behavior and drive them away from areas that are important to their survival, and sometimes intense exposure to noise can even cause one of these whales to strand and die, which truly is just awful. In our number 5 spot today we have Star Wars. Okay, you might be wondering why something relating to Star Wars is on this list since we are talking about the sea, but just listen to the sound and then tell me what you think. That sounds kinda like little fighter jets or something, right? Well, it definitely had some people stumped for a while when it was first heard, but luckily this one has a fairly simple and harmless explanation. The Star Wars sound is actually coming from dwarf minke whales. Apparently a lot of strange ocean noises end up either being attributed to whales or icebergs. Considering how creepy this sound can be when they have no explanation, I'm kind of glad to know that most things end up being relatively harmless and way less scary in reality. In our number 4 spot today we have the Atlantic cod. Atlantic cod are known for their ability to produce clicks, growls, and thumps as their way of communicating. The clicks I'm about to show you are apparently intended to ward off potential predators, including humans, and I truly feel like it might be working. While this sound was recorded on a hydrophone, it's been said that divers who have encountered these fish in the ocean have also been able to hear these warning clicks so as to let them know not to get close. These fish also of course have different less aggressive sounds as well that they use for things like mating season or to be able to warn others of their kind of potential dangers that are lurking in the icy waters. In our number 3 spot today we have the ping. This is a sound that no one has been able to figure out where it is coming from. I'll admit this one wasn't captured by a submarine, but I had to include it because it is coming from the water and it is so mysterious that scientists and even the military still aren't sure what exactly is going on here. This sound can be heard in the Kikatalik region of the Canadian territory Nunavut and is coming from the Fury and Hecla Strait. This sound has been described by some as a ping and by others as a hum, but the main issue is that this area is a hunting area and whatever the sound is, it is scaring off all of the wildlife. Because of the reports of this mysterious sound, even the military came to investigate, but still, no one is exactly sure where this sound could have been coming from or what it could be linked to. For now, the mysteries that lay below the Arctic ice are destined to remain a secret. In our number 2 spot today we have This sound is one that was captured on a hydrophone and it truly sounds like someone just trying to add some inflection to their voice to ask a question. I'll give you 1 second to take a guess first. Did you guess another whale? Well, you'd be right then. This sound is coming from the North Atlantic right whale and is not just the sound of a super confused person. These whales are one of the world's endangered large whale species, with there being only 400 left in the Atlantic Ocean. The sound you just heard is the sound they use to communicate with others of their species. Their sounds are usually low frequency moans or groans, and they are used to indicate things like warnings, contact, aggression, or just other social signals in general. In our number 1 spot today we have boom. Okay, maybe the last one was a little too easy, so here's another sound that I'm gonna let you guess, and maybe it will be a little harder this time. Do you have a guess as to what that big boom was? Apparently, that sound was caught on a hydrophone and it is coming from an underwater oil rig. Remember when we were talking about the man-made sound pollution of the deep sea and how it affects the marine life? This is exactly the kind of thing we were talking about. I don't have the solution on how to make it better or how to fix the problem. All I know is that it is one, and honestly, how could it not be? That sound freaked me out while I was sitting comfortably at my desk researching, so I can imagine hearing it when I wasn't expecting it in the comfort of my own home. That just sounds awful.
Number 9. Shifting plates. I remember this back in 2013. I hope this rings a bell for some of you watching. In 2013, a woman in British Columbia, over in Canada, heard a trumpet sound. A low, slow, like a trumpet, or so she thought. At first, nothing came from these claims or videos, just a few comments saying, that's weird, which it is. But then it started to happen in areas all over the world, from Texas to Norway, so something's going on. It's the same slow, loud trumpet sound. Well, it turns out this sound was coming from the ocean this whole time. Because again, in 2018, a little more recently, the same low-pitched humming noise was heard in Hawaii, Kenya, and then Chile. So what we're hearing all these years are shifting tectonic plates. That's our best guess at this point. Undersea volcanoes, sure, just moving some deep sea furniture around. It's gotta be loud. Some folk believe that there's another dimension underneath the ocean floor, so maybe this is just a door opening and closing. Maybe this is the bouncer being like, oh, come on in, okay. Either way, I'm good here on land, never going down there. Number 8, Quacker. Quaker Oats, the Quacker. Not to be confused with the Kraken, he's a little bit different. This is the Quacker. A loud quack was heard during the Cold War, so a little bit older. It was recorded while Soviet Navy ballistic missile submarines were heading through North Atlantic and Arctic waters. They heard quacking or ribbit, something like some sort of deep sea duck. Whenever submarines passed a certain area, this loud quack would come from deep below, and it came from an object that was moving around. That's the mysterious part. That's why we threw it on our list today. The Soviets thought they were overhearing secret US tech, like I guess some deep sea duck radar. I've heard rumors of that one. That's good. That was in a James Bond movie for sure. Scientists believe that it came from a giant squid, which is somehow more alarming than the ocean floor. Number 7, underwater underworld. Back in 2018, a diver was exploring flooded caves in Mexico's Yucatan Peninsula. They were on the beach having a good time, then they saw this opening about 1.5 feet wide, barely enough to fit one person, and this diver was like, they went through. That's terrifying. First of all, bravo, hats off, that's extremely brave. But then they found this underwater tunnel that connected the Saskatoon Cave and the Dos Ojos cave system. So this is a huge discovery. Because now this is considered one of the largest underwater cave systems in the world. In total, it runs about 347 kilometers long. I can't even fathom how long that is underwater. This cave has been untouched since the last ice age, rightfully so. And the 200 pockets inside are filled with bones, Mayan altars, fossils belonging to now extinct animals. It's basically a time capsule from 15,000 years ago. So if you're diving through small cave entrances, don't go alone, or you might get stuck in time, apparently. Or you might find thousands of bones, or a possible entrance to the underworld. Yeah, that's also a hot rumor for this underwater Mayan cave system. I forgot my flippers. Can't go, sorry guys. Have fun though, sounds like a great time. Number 6, Titan Ocean. This one is literally out of this world. Coming from one of the many, many moons of Saturn, Titan, around 10 years ago, NASA's Cassini spacecraft detected water underneath its massive shell of ice. That's pretty exciting. To quote a Cassini team member, the search for water is an important goal in solar system exploration, and now we've spotted another place where it's abundant. NASA has also detected low-frequency radio waves on this moon before, so perhaps there's something going on under the space sea. Our own ocean is mysterious enough, let alone receiving signals from an ocean in space. No thanks, I don't want to even think about what's up there. Number 5, the Kraken. Jack Sparrow's worst nightmare. Is it real? Is the Kraken actually a real thing? Where does this come from? Well, maybe. The giant squid is not that far-fetched. Some creatures in the ocean are massive as is, like for example, this manta ray off the coast of Trinidad. If the internet didn't exist and I saw this in real life, I wouldn't be able to sleep at night. So of course, many sailors reported seeing the Kraken at one point or another. The ocean's terrifying. For ages now, sailors specifically from Norway and Greenland have all continued to share eyewitness reports of a giant sea monster, the Kraken. Apparently it had tentacles big enough to pull you and your mateys right off of the ship. In 1857, Danish naturalist Japetus Steenstrup found a large squid beak, and then soon after, he was sent parts of another specimen from the Bahamas. So people were trying to help him out. So he concluded with all these gross puzzle pieces that the Kraken is real, and it's part of a species of giant squid called Architeuthis dux, which is Latin for ruling squid. Very little is known about giant squid, seeing as they're so hard to track, but we did get a photo of one back in 2005 and a video of one in 2013. Number 3, the Green Flash. I watch way too many superhero movies, so this next one had me pacing around my living room for a hot minute. Who is this? Who is this guy? Who's this Green Flash man? The Green Flash phenomena happens in the ocean. So far, we've only observed the flash above water, but I'm sure there's some mysterious happenings going on below, I'm sure there's a few confused fish over there when it happens. This happens during sunset and sunrise. Best time to see the Green Flash is on a clear evening over water, and the air must be clean. So if you're in a polluted city, you're like, damn it. The reason we see a green flash is because of our boy, Roy G. Biv. This is the G in Roy G. Biv. Sunlight reflects off the atmosphere like a big old prism, and in turn, for thousands of years, humans have probably been like, what was that? I just saw a green flash. I keep seeing it every night. What is going on? They're probably so confused for thousands of years. No, it's not a Justice League villain. It's just the sunset. Number 2, HMS Daedalus. This 19th century warship belonged to the Royal Navy. It was this big class beauty equipped with 19 guns, and it launched at Woolwich Dockyard in 1844. It was a big deal. 4 years later, Captain McEway, along with his officers and crew, all set sail to St. Helena, but during their commute, they were visited. Yeah, this is why we have the guns on the side of the ship. If any trouble comes along, be it pirates, whatever the case, we're now equipped. Thing is, this visitor didn't come from the sides or the front or the back, it came from below, in the form of a 60-foot long serpent. And it hung around for 20 minutes, apparently, with its head breaking the surface of the water occasionally. The captain said it was so close under the ship that if it was one of his own crew members under there, he could have easily recognized their face. That's how clear the water was. It wasn't choppy or cloudy, it was a normal day, otherwise. So do we think 60-foot long sea snakes exist? Who's to say? I mean, considering this list, I'd say yeah. We barely explored our own ocean. And finally, number 1, the Milky Sea phenomenon. This one you can see from space, so we're leaving the biggest and brightest for last, folks. The Milky Sea phenomenon was first observed back in 1864 by Captain Raphael Semmes. Captain Raphael Semmes journaled it aboard his CSS Alabama. He wrote about passing from the deep blue waters into a patch of water so bright that it startled him. The whole face of nature seemed to change, and with a little stretch of imagination, the Alabama might have been conceived to be a phantom ship lighted up by the sickly and unearthly glare of a phantom sea. That's not an exaggeration as well. This phenomena is something out of Avatar, really. It's so alien-like. Bioluminescence is part of the reason for this ghostly bright blue appearance, but sailors say there is something sinister about it as well. To this day, we don't fully understand how bioluminescence works, but it's continuing to blow our minds. For example, we just discovered a new shark. We just found a glowing shark. A glowing shark. What is happening here? The Milky Sea phenomenon is bigger than a glowy shark, and it can span around 100,000 square miles, so you'll see it. If it's around, you'll probably see it. It lasts for a few nights too, so I don't blame these sailors for getting spooked out. In 2005, we got low orbit satellites to snap a pic of this phenomenon, but even so, we don't fully understand why it happens. But we're trying our best.
Starting us off at number 10, we have the final resting place. When it comes to Titanic related hauntings, it should come as no big surprise that the actual site where the tragedy occurred is considered one of the most haunted spots of all. According to those who have visited since the fateful day, strange sights such as odd glowing orbs of light can be seen floating around at night, and many believe they are actually the spirits of those who died at sea. But that's not all. Deep sea vessels that have explored the area near the sinking have reported to receive eerie, faint SOS calls that fade in and out and seem to have no traceable source. Could they be the ghosts of the fallen crying out for help? Many definitely believe so. Now, orbs of light and radio static are nowhere near unheard of when it comes to suspected paranormal activity, especially when you're dealing with a place such as this where so many people have perished. However, the most terrifying curse of all has to do with an old legend that says if you aren't careful, the lonely ghosts in the sea may just pull you overboard to live the rest of eternity with them. So just be safe if you are sailing in the area. Coming in at number 9, Titanic's builder. Inside the Titanic exhibit in the Luxor Hotel is a portrait of a man named J. Bruce Ismay, who was one of the builders of the Titanic many years ago. However, the thing about Ismay was that he's not really what you would describe as a hero. Apparently, he fled the sinking ship, leaving women and their families behind, and witnesses on the lifeboats claim he kept his back to the ship as it descended. But worst of all, it said he was the one insisting the ship speed up after receiving ice warnings. And as a result, it's believed he is not terribly liked by the ghosts who did not survive the disaster. In fact, one morning in particular, as the crew came in to open the exhibit, they found the portrait of Ismay on the floor. When the manager watched the surveillance video from the night before, he was stunned to see the picture began shaking before coming off of the wall, seemingly all by itself. Many believe that those who perished that night haunt the exhibit, tearing down his photo, and some believe that if you aren't careful, they may just curse you for being associated with him. Coming in at number 8, no Pope. So this next one is kind of a full conspiracy, but you know what? I just couldn't help myself. Apparently, one of the myths that supports the idea that the ship was cursed comes from the ship's number. The number in question was allegedly 390904, but some Catholic employees who built the ship were distressed at the time as the number, when viewed in a mirror, appears to say no Pope. Apparently this meant that the ship was cursed and godless in their eyes, and that coupled with someone allegedly saying that God could not sink the ship made for one giant cursed vessel. To be honest, I'm not sure how much of this myth is based in fact and how much of it is a glorified legend, but I'm not out to tempt fate in the same way the Titanic did all those years ago. Coming in at number 7, Ghost of the Titanic. One can assume that there are as many ghosts as there were fatalities associated with the infamous sinking of the ship, but one of the most famous is thought to be that of Frederick Fleet. Frederick was a British sailor serving as the lookout aboard the RMS Titanic, and it was Frederick who actually spotted the deadly iceberg and warned the bridge. But tragically, as we know, his warning came too late and the ship was not able to avoid the disastrous collision. However, the saddest part was that although Fleet survived the sinking of the Titanic, he suffered deeply from depression, in part to his survivor's guilt. And tragically, his depression only grew worse over time. Finally, after his wife's passing just after Christmas in 1964 and the shortly followed eviction from his brother-in-law, Frederick took his own life. Following his death, he was buried, but strangely his grave remained unmarked until the Titanic Historical Society erected a headstone for him in 1993. These days, however, it appears his spirit is not quite at rest, as witnesses have claimed to see him keeping watch over the Las Vegas exhibition's promenade deck, perhaps driven by his guilt to watch even in the afterlife. Next up at number 6, a ghost on board. Back in 1977, Second Officer Leonard Bishop of the SS Winter Haven gave a tour of the ship to a man who he naturally assumed was a passenger. Apparently the man was British and very soft-spoken, but extremely interested in every detail of the vessel, almost unusually so. Bishop found the man to be a bit strange, but didn't think much of it, and continued to tour him around. But it wasn't until a few years later, when he saw a photo of Titanic Captain Edward John Smith, that Officer Bishop realized why the situation felt so off. Allegedly, he exclaimed to a friend, "I know him, I gave him a tour of my boat." But the friend laughed and explained to his friend that the man had been long dead and that the man he claimed to know was the captain of the Titanic. Turns out the captain still remains at sea and likes to check up on the passing boats. Let's just hope he's not looking to be vengeful. Coming in at number 5, Lady in Black. Almost any haunted location has some kind of Lady in Black. I'm not sure exactly why, but it just happens to be part of the brand. And the Titanic Artifact exhibition is no exception. Employees and guests alike all claim to have seen this mysterious woman, and it's said she wears a black period dress with a white collar and her hair in a bun. However, the most eerie of stories surrounding this ghost has to do with a photographer. Reportedly, he was getting ready for the opening of an exhibition when he spotted this woman casually walking down the grand staircase. He was understandably startled, as he hadn't noticed anyone enter and the staircase was roped off, but he just assumed he must have missed her come in and that she was a part of the exhibit. So, trying to be friendly, he asked if she'd like him to photograph her, but she ignored him. So he went back to setting up, but suddenly she was directly behind him. So again, he offered a photograph, but this time she didn't just ignore him, she vanished right before his very eyes. It's believed she is a ghost of a woman who died on the ship, and while no one knows exactly who she might be, let's just hope she's not a dangerous spirit. Next up at number 4, a premonition. As the legend goes, on the very same night the ship went down, a young Scottish woman by the name of Jessie was on the verge of dying. It's said that in her delirious state, she supposedly spoke of a massive sinking ship and a man named Wally playing a fiddle, despite the fact that she would have no way of knowing the Titanic would sink that night. Unless she was placing some kind of curse, that is. I have to say the most insane part of the legend is that a man named Wallace, aka Wally Hartley, did indeed play his violin one last time as he and his band went down with the ship. Let's just hope some woman on her deathbed wasn't the reason this all happened. Coming in at number 3, the unlucky mummy. One of the most well-known alleged curses surrounding the Titanic is that of the unlucky mummy. Now, for a little context, approximately 1,000 years before the time of Christ, a woman who has since been dubbed a priestess of the College of Amun-Ra was born in the city of Thebes, Egypt. And it is believed this mummy is her embalmed body. Now, in terms of the unluckiness surrounding her mummy, in the late 1890s, archaeologists discovered the burial site during a dig near Egypt's lost city of Luxor. According to legend, a rich Englishman arranged for the purchase of the mummy and her casket. However, as reported by the Museum of Unnatural History, the man inexplicably vanished before his purchase could be delivered. Then later, all 3 of his travel companions suffered misfortune. One of the men died, another was disabled in an accident, and the third suffered financial ruin. From that day forward, it was believed that anyone or anything that this mummy came into contact with would be cursed by misfortune, and rumors suggest that the mummy was eventually purchased by an American archaeologist who arranged for it to be transported to the United States aboard the Titanic. So, for all we know, some ancient cursed mummy could have cursed the ship and sent it to its dark fate. Coming in at number 2, missing tourists. If there was ever an argument to be made for scary curses surrounding the Titanic, then this next story is probably the one I would pick. You may or may not have seen and heard the terrifying story that is unfolding as we speak, but essentially there was a tourist submarine that set out to tour the wreckage of the Titanic that has now been missing for over 48 hours. The missing vessel has 5 people on board, including British billionaire Hamish Harding, French diver Paul-Henri Nargeolet, Pakistani entrepreneur Shahzad Dawood with his son, and the final passenger is believed to be Stockton Rush, the founder of Ocean Gate Expeditions. The submarine dove down on Sunday morning, but after only an hour and 45 minutes into the tour, they lost all communication. Now, besides the obviously nerve-wracking part of this all, what is really scary is that according to Ocean Gate's website, the submarine can only last for up to 96 hours underwater with 5 people consuming oxygen. So the clock is ticking for the search and rescue team to try and track down the disappearing vessel before it's too late. It is truly a horrific and nightmare-inducing situation, and many believe that the waters surrounding the haunted ship are to blame. And last up in our number 1 spot today is the wreck of the Titan. There are many conspiracy theories surrounding the Titanic, one being that it never actually set sail, another being that it deliberately sunk, but to be honest, none of them really hold much validity. However, there is one interesting conspiracy theory, and that is that a man named Morgan Robertson actually predicted and potentially even cursed the infamous ship when he published his novel The Wreck of the Titan in 1898, 14 years before the real-life disaster. Now, to be clear, Robertson rejected any claims stating that he had something to do with the disaster, and insisted he was just drawing on his own real-life experiences as a sailor. But I have to admit, some of the similarities between his story and the real-life events are a little creepy. For example, even if you ignore that they had similar names, the fictitious Titan, like the Titanic, was supposed to be the largest of its kind and an unsinkable ship. Plus, it also lacked enough lifeboats to accommodate its passenger load, and struck an iceberg while going too fast in the North Atlantic. And as if that weren't strangely similar enough, both disasters took place in April and cost thousands of people their lives. So, do you think this book was some kind of curse on the ship, or just a really creepy coincidence?
Starting off our list in the number 10 spot, we have the Ocean Gate's Titan. Of course, we had to start with this one today because this story is currently unfolding as we speak. A significant search and rescue mission is currently in progress in the Atlantic Ocean, where a tourist submarine touring the Titanic wreckage has been missing for over 48 hours. On board the submarine, known as the OceanGate's Titan submersible are 5 individuals, including British billionaire adventurer Hamish Harding, esteemed French diver Paul-Henri Nargeolet, and Pakistani entrepreneur Shahzad Dawood and his son Suleiman Dawood. The 5th person is believed to be Stockton Rush, the founder of OceanGate Expeditions. The Titan submersible was equipped with a 4-day emergency supply of oxygen before its departure. Rear Admiral John Mauger of the U.S. Coast Guard indicated on Monday that they anticipate between 70 to 96 hours of oxygen supply remaining. The submarine dove on Sunday morning, but communication with the Polar Prince, its Canadian research icebreaker support vessel, was lost approximately an hour and 45 minutes later. OceanGate Expeditions, a firm providing 8-day trips to visit the Titanic wreckage at a very hefty price of $250,000 per individual, is currently mobilizing all possible options to safely retrieve the crew. Both the US and Canadian Coast Guards are participating in the ongoing rescue efforts, and it truly is an absolutely horrifying scenario.
Number 9. USS Scorpion. The ill-fated USS Scorpion was an American nuclear submarine that mysteriously disappeared in the Atlantic Ocean back in 1968. It was carrying a crew of 99, and the disappearance of the submarine sent shockwaves through the naval community. The USS Scorpion was expected to return in a port in Norfolk, Virginia, but as days turned into weeks, it was quite clear that something bad had happened. Now, despite deploying massive search operations, not a single trace of the submarine was found, as if it was swallowed whole by the ocean. There's nothing left. That's why the ocean is so terrifying. Again, my palms are wet as I'm doing this list. It wasn't until several months later that the wreckage was finally found. The remnants of the once formidable USS Scorpion were found resting at an incredible depth of 10,000 feet below the ocean's surface. The discovery raised more questions than it did answer. What led to the tragic end of such an advanced submarine? How did this happen? Speculations abound, with theories pointing to possibilities from equipment malfunction to a self-inflicted torpedo explosion. But the real answer remains elusive, hidden deep within the unforgiving grasp of the sea. Terrifying.
In our number 8 spot today, we have the HMS Thetis. Thetis embarked on her maiden dive in 1939, an event that was meant to signify the start of a long and successful tenure at sea. Tragically, however, the first voyage quickly descended into disaster. Due to a very catastrophic malfunction of a torpedo tube, the Thetis sank into the depths. As the vessel succumbed to the ocean's relentless pressure, the majority of the crew found themselves trapped within the submarine's metal confines. Despite their best efforts, most of the crew tragically succumbed to suffocation in the cold, unyielding grip of the sea. In the face of this dire situation, a handful of crew members managed to escape using early versions of rebreathing devices. These devices, while primitive, saved the lives of the lucky few who were able to use them effectively. Subsequent salvage operations managed to retrieve the Thetis from her watery grave. However, the memory of her maiden voyage remains etched in the annals of the Royal Navy as one of its worst peacetime disasters. The loss of the Thetis was not just the sinking of a submarine, it was a shocking revelation of the state of naval preparedness at the time. It was a harsh lesson learned and a wake-up call to the Royal Navy.
Number 7. Minerve. In 1968, the French submarine Minerve disappeared into the depths of the Mediterranean Sea. Along with the submarine, there's 52 crew members that happened to also vanish, leaving behind a country in shock and a mystery that seemed impossible to solve. Despite immediate and intense search efforts involving a formidable assembly of ships, they couldn't find anything despite all efforts. No trace of the vessel was found, no debris washed ashore, no distress signals were picked up. Nothing. The Minerve had disappeared, literally this time without a trace, leaving behind a void filled with sorrow, unanswered questions, and a nation in mourning. Now, over the following years, the memory of the Minerve remained alive, but a profound silence surrounded the lost submarine. A silence that lasted over half a century. But in 2019, more than 50 years after the Minerve vanished, a glimmer of closure finally arrived. 50 years too late, but better late than never. The wreckage of the lost submarine was discovered, finally. It brought a sense of tangible reality to a story that had for so long been this haunting enigma. Now, despite this discovery, the cause of the disaster still remains cloaked in mystery, leaving the tale of the Minerve as one of the most enigmatic and haunting narratives of the deep. I'm never swimming again.
In our number 6 spot today, we have the USS Greyback. The USS Greyback was an American submarine that prowled the expanses of the Pacific Ocean, striking fear into the hearts of enemy vessels. With a successful combat record, the Greyback was considered an essential asset until it mysteriously went missing in 1944. Shockwaves rippled through the ranks when the Greyback failed to return from patrol. An air of disbelief surrounded its sudden and unexplained disappearance. The official explanation pointed towards an operational error in deciphering the submarine's last known position. This misinterpretation tragically led the search efforts astray, and the Greyback was declared lost at sea. For many decades, the submarine's fate remained shrouded in mystery, its whereabouts unknown. Then, in a chilling revelation, the Greyback's watery grave was finally discovered in 2019. The submarine was found resting in the ocean's depths, its once formidable structure now a very silent and eerie testament to a bygone era. The discovery of the USS Greyback not only confirmed its final resting place, but also served as a solemn reminder of the perils of warfare and the brave souls who navigate them.
Number 5. K-129. In the annals of maritime history, few tales incite as much intrigue and speculation as the mysterious disappearance of the Russian submarine K-129. In 1968, this formidable vessel vanished without a trace in the Pacific Ocean, taking with it a crew of 98 men and a deadly payload of nuclear ballistic missiles. Not a great thing to lose by any means, not at all. The vanishing of K-129 set off a frantic and exhaustive search by the Soviet Navy. However, despite their best efforts, they were unable to locate any trace of the missing submarine, of course. The loss of K-129 with its crew and deadly arsenal represented a significant and unsettling mystery of the Cold War era. In an incredible twist, the CIA embarked on a covert operation named Project Azorian. Using advanced technology and deep-sea recovery techniques, the CIA was able to locate and partially raise the wreck of K-129 from the depths of the Pacific Ocean. This top-secret operation only added to this enigma surrounding the submarine's fate. Yet, despite these efforts, the reasons behind the sinkings of K-129 remain shrouded in Cold War secrecy and intrigue. Was it onboard equipment malfunction, a failed missile launch, or something more sinister? Who knows? The truth lies hidden with K-129 in the dark and silent depths of the Pacific Ocean. And we're never gonna know.
In our number 4 spot today, we have the INS Dakar. The story of the Israeli submarine INS Dakar is a chilling reminder of the unpredictable perils of the deep sea. This submarine, originally named HMS Totem during its service in the Royal Navy, met a tragic end in 1968 while journeying to Israel. The Dakar, now a ghostly relic in the Mediterranean Sea, was on its maiden voyage to its new home port when it tragically disappeared, taking with it the lives of 69 crew members. The sudden silence from the Dakar triggered an extensive search operation that spanned decades. Nations joined hands, deploying advanced technology in an attempt to locate the missing submarine, but the Mediterranean Sea, with its vast expanse, kept its secret well hidden. Despite the tireless efforts, it took more than 30 long years before the wreckage of the Dakar was finally located. The investigation into the disaster pointed towards a catastrophic hull failure as the cause of the sinking. However, the exact reasons for this failure remain buried with the submarine.
Number 3. The HMS Affray. The British submarine HMS Affray vanished in 1951 during a training mission, and not only this, but this event marked the last time a British submarine was lost at sea. HMS Affray was on a routine training exercise in the English Channel with 75 crew members and trainees on board. Now, as part of the exercise, the submarine sent a routine radio message, a mundane act that would become its last known contact with the surface. Now suddenly, and without explanation, the Affray was engulfed by silence. This sudden radio silence sparked a massive search operation, of course, but the submarine remained elusive, its fate unknown. The search for the Affray lasted for several months before the submarine was finally, thankfully, found. Now, the discovery was chilling. The Affray lay silent and lifeless at the bottom of the English Channel. Investigations into the disaster pointed towards a potential failure of the submarine's breathing apparatus as the primary cause. However, despite the best efforts and investigations, the precise reason for the Affray's tragic end remains a mystery, submerged in speculation and uncertainty. What a way to go.
In our number 2 spot today, we have the ARA San Juan. In 2017, the San Juan and her crew of 44 mysteriously vanished off the Argentine coast, inciting a desperate search and a nation's collective anxiety. The San Juan was not just a submarine, it was an embodiment of Argentina's maritime capabilities, an icon of national pride. When it disappeared, it left an eerie silence and a trail of unanswered questions. The world watched in suspense as an extensive, multinational search operation unfolded, the sea's vast expanse challenging every effort to locate the missing submarine. A full year passed before the wreckage of the San Juan was finally discovered, resting in the unforgiving depths of the ocean at 3,000 feet. The discovery, however, brought more grief than relief as it confirmed the tragic fate of the 44 souls on board. Investigations into the cause of the disaster pointed towards a sudden onboard explosion, likely triggered by a faulty battery. This catastrophic event would have given the crew little chance of survival, abruptly ending their underwater journey.
And finally, number 1, the KRI Nangala. During a routine training exercise in the Bali Sea, the KRI Nangala, a German-made vessel, set out with 53 brave souls on board. Now suddenly, an unsettling turn of events unfolded. Nangala vanished without a trace, leaving behind a wake of uncertainty and fear. A massive international search and rescue operation was immediately launched as nations rallied together in a race against time to locate the missing submarine and its crew. Naval vessels, aircraft, the best technology they could get their hands on, all of this was deployed in a desperate search for answers. Days turned into nights, loved ones were waiting anxiously for any news, and finally, a chilling discovery shattered all hope that remained. The wreckage of the KRI Nangala was found on the ocean floor, fragmented into 3 parts. Now, it's believed that a blackout occurred on board, leading to a loss of control over the submarine. In the haunting depths of the Bali Sea, the vessel succumbed to the immense pressure, and its hull compromised and shattered. Terrifying, absolute terrifying way to go. Couldn't imagine.